Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Tompsett, along with my partner in crime, Aaron. You look refreshed. You look recharged. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. I thought this loss, like we talked about it there in the post game show, they usually don't linger for me. I thought this one was going to really linger for me all week. You know what? I think that it made it so it's not so hard and doesn't stick so bad. That was such a winnable game for the Bills. When we
Yeah.
watch it back, there were so many opportunities to win that game. The Bills actually played pretty well. There was, a handful of plays where that game went the other way. And so I still feel good about this team. Everything I felt going into that Titans game, I still feel about this team. And we were talking about it offline. You play that game 10 times, the Bills win 8 times. So I still feel real good. So that helped me to get over, and I'm excited to talk to you here because we got the bye week. This is always one of my favorite episodes of the year, no matter where it falls, that we can kind of catch up where our team's at and sort of take a step back and look at the big picture. So I'm excited. I've been thinking about all this all day. So let's get into it, man.
Yeah, it's funny. We joked, and I've talked to a couple different people. Rewatching that game was both reassuring and frustrating. Like, it was reassuring in the sense that, man, if that same kind of game played out 10 times, I think the Bills might win like 8 of them. And man, why was it one of the other two?
Yeah.
And it's frustrating, and that comes up now because the Bills are technically now the 4th seed in the AFC, and I don't know with the schedules coming up that the Ravens and the Chargers and the Titans have. I still think the Bills right now, even being 4-2, the Ravens are 5-1, the Chargers, Titans, Bills are 4-2. Also, technically, the Bengals and the Raiders are 4-2. God bless them.
Yep.
We'll be all rooting for the Bengals against the Ravens this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
With the schedules of those other teams, I don't know that I think anyone has a better shot at the number 1 seed than the Bills do. But this shows that just having the best odds and I think the best team doesn't guarantee it, because you can drop games to teams
Mm-hmm.
like Tennessee, and those will add up if you let more of those happen or too many more of those happen. So we'll go through that with the rest of the schedule, but it was a combination of reassuring and frustrating. The team's very, very talented. The team's very good. It should have won that game, and I think the fact knowing that a lot more wins are coming made it okay for me.
Yeah, totally. And to kind of piggyback off that idea of, I agree with you. You don't want this to spill over and lose more games like that, especially the AFC competitors. You don't want to lose tiebreakers.
That's
in
the
AFC.
reason we're the 4th seed, is that we lost the tiebreaker based on
Totally.
the head-to-head.
I think it's still an early point in the season where I don't think a number of wins for the Titans is sustainable. They're not going to win games like they just won that game. They gave everything to Buffalo. This is part of the problem for Buffalo this year is you're getting the best of everybody. Now that you're the team that everybody's talking about as the Super Bowl favorites, and every coach in the league is hanging all this praise for the Bills up against his team on their bulletin board every single week. Teams are pumped to play you, especially in prime time. So you're getting the best of everybody. I don't think the Titans are sustainably going to win games like that. I don't even think the Ravens almost lost to the Lions. They needed a 68-yard field goal to beat the Lions. They also had bad games. The Chargers have had bad games.
The Chargers got smoked by the Ravens.
Absolutely.
The Titans lost to the Jets.
All these teams are flawed. I think the Bills are probably the least flawed. I think the Bills have the more sustainable way to win games. We've seen it over a longer stretch. Now the Ravens are probably still right there with them. I think the Ravens are a legit contender for that 1 seed. You're always going to have somebody there. It's not going to be the Chiefs this year, so it's just going to be the Ravens. I think the Bills are still very much, even though they're sitting at the 4. When we look ahead at this schedule, I think they're very much
6 or 8 weeks from now that the Chiefs are actually right there with us for the number 1 seed. I won't be
Could
shocked.
be.
They get their stuff together and Chris Jones comes back and lights a charge in that defense to be just bad, not historically bad. Yeah, you never know.
I think the Bills will have a legitimate shot at it this year. And anyone that thought they would have a runaway shot at it at the end of the year, I think is fooling themselves. I don't think there's any scenario where the Bills are 16-1 or 15-2, and they're just the runaway favorite for that. The AFC stack, there's good teams in it. We know that they will be in the running for that one bye at the end of the year. And I think that's all that should matter to Bill. That's the goal. And if they're in the running towards the end of the year, that's all we can ask for.
Kel, we appreciate your contribution very much. And I'll say that I get the question, and it's I'm not, this is not an accusation of you. I think all of us fall prey to recency bias.
Sure.
They literally just won a Sunday Night Football and beat Patrick Mahomes in the Chiefs. So obviously they show up against top competition. The Chiefs are still a better team than the Titans to me. If those two teams played, matter of fact, they played this week. I think the Chiefs are going to win comfortably. That kind of thing is something where I think the Bills have shown the capability to do that. They won 2 playoff games last year, dominant win over Baltimore. Those kind of things are just fine. The Bills are now at the point where I know a lot of people have said it in different ways. There's no such thing as a statement win for the Bills anymore. They're good. They're really good. They don't need to prove
if they
anything.
came out and stomped the Bucks, maybe that would be the only statement you can make at this point.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, not that there can't be impressive wins,
right,
but they don't need to make a point anymore.
To prove it.
They're good. They're going to be favored in literally every single game except for one the rest of the season. The Bills have 11 games left. They're going to be favored in 10 out of the 11 games. They're good, full stop. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't flaws, or doesn't mean there aren't things we need to improve on. We'll talk about that as
other
the show
teams
goes.
aren't also good or close to it.
Of course.
Definitely.
I don't think the Bills are way. I mean, I've watched the Ravens play the last couple of weeks. The Ravens are freaking good. The Ravens are going to be a problem. If Lamar Jackson is passing as well as he is right now, that's going to be a tough team.
Yeah.
The Chiefs are always dangerous. The Bills aren't going to just smoke the Chiefs again because they beat them handily this last time. We just talked about the fact I think the Bills would beat the Titans most of the times they played, 4 out of 5 times. It doesn't mean the Titans can't win. They just won.
I don't want to test it in the playoffs.
Yeah, I'd prefer not to find out. I'd prefer not to see Derrick Henry again in my adult life. That'd be great. That's a scary human.
Yeah.
So there's lots of other talented teams, but it's exciting and reassuring to know that the Bills are one of those teams, and in my opinion, probably the highest floor of any of those teams. I think they have the capability. That so many things went wrong. We talked about it. All the different things, the weird ball off Micah Hyde's helmet, the didn't get a holding call on Derrick Henry's 76-yard touchdown, but we got a holding call on our 101-yard kick return. All the things that went against them. And the Bills still had the ball at the Titans' 2-yard line with 13 seconds left to win the game. And all those things went against them. That's how good this team is and why fans should be excited.
Let's stay right there with how good this team is. So we have that loss. Everyone's a we're frustrated because we're really coming off that Kansas City win. And you saw all the stats and how great the Bills look against everybody. Yeah, Aaron Schatz at Football Outsiders and stuff was making constant, this is a historic defense, yada, yada. Everyone's super excited. The dust settles, the Bills are still the best DVOA team in the NFL. They're the second best Dave, 12th overall offense, first overall defense, even after that performance and giving up that many points. They did drop to 6th in rush instead of 2nd or whatever they were, but they're still first in pass defense. I mean, this team is still up there in the conversation of the top 3 best teams in the NFL, even after a tough loss in a game like that to the Titans. So I think as fans, we got really emotional. Things were, this isn't good. There's all these problems to fix. The Bills are still ranked, and you can line it up across most statistics. They're still one of the top 3 teams in the NFL, no matter what stat you look at.
They went from the most points scored in the NFL and the least points given up all the way down to the second most points scored and the second most points given up.
Yeah, big drop. Big tough week.
The second most points given up is because the Saints had a bye. So they're the only team that's played 6 games and only given up under 100 points. They still have by far the biggest point differential. They still are in great position from those things as far as those things go. And we're going to get to it. There's the Bills fans, we always had those years all the time where we talk about, oh man, we're playing every single team coming off a bye. And we have all these crazy West Coast road trips. And man, we got such a tough schedule this year. It's really hard. That's not this year, and Bills fans don't need to apologize for that. You didn't do anything wrong. The way that it lines up this year, the remaining schedule is not a terrible thing. And I know this is a good one. You talked about how you get excited about this show every year to kind of take a pulse check on where the team is. It is an early bye, but we knew that coming in. At the 6-game mark at this point, what did you have them projected as coming into this game with the 6 games we played so far? What did you think their record would be at this break?
I had them at 4-2. I did not have it with the Steelers as one of the losses, but I did have them losing to the Titans. I picked them to lose to the Chiefs and Titans and my reasoning was sort of until you prove that you can get over that hump, and we saw the same back-to-back stretch last year, and those were burned into my memory that I wasn't willing to pick the Bills until I saw it. Luckily, they beat the Chiefs and then still end up losing the Titans, but I had them at 4-2. So getting to the bye and being at 4-2 feels like a win to me, even though I understand why fans are frustrated because it really should be 5-1, and we should be ahead of schedule from where I thought.
And I was very close to that. I did have it at 5-1 because I said I thought they were going to upset the Chiefs, but then they were going to drop a stupid game later on that they shouldn't, and it happened. The stupid game that they shouldn't was Week 1 against the Steelers. I don't count on the road in Tennessee to Derrick Henry with both AJ Brown and Julio Jones back healthy. Bud Dupree's first game back, him coming back. That's a talented team still.
For sure.
That isn't some horrendous loss, and losing by 3 points on the road there, although frustrating, that's not the same as losing to the Texans or dropping a game to the Jets or dropping the game to the Jags. They're 4-2 and in the playoff run, just like everybody else. So now we're at that point. Let's kind of go through a chunk here for any fans who aren't aware. As we come out of the bye, the Bills are going to be in on Halloween playing at home against the Jags. We'll do another quarter here. The nice stretch is we come out in Dolphins, Jags, Jets. 2 of those are on the road, but man, how is that for kind of a get-right stretch coming out of some frustration, sitting there letting it burn in their bellies during the bye, and you come back with Dolphins, Jags, Jets.
Yeah, and also a great stretch here for Dawson Knox injury and whatever time he needs to recover from that.
Give him all the time.
Yeah, and they've gone in with no injuries that are listed, but let's not fool ourselves. This is the NFL. Having a stretch right now, I'm sure Milano could use an extra stretch here of treatments over the next week. I'm sure a number of guys could. And then you have these 3 games. I'm not saying, obviously, they're going to say it every week. You can't sleep on anyone in the NFL. Yeah, all the cliches. They're all true. Any of these teams can present some type of a problem if you sleep on them. But this, on paper, is just like licking your chops for the type of games that they can put up. This is as close to an FCS schedule as you get in the NFL.
It's a non-conference game.
Yeah, it really is as close to it as you can get with the on paper, the way these 2 teams stack up. And I know the Bills would be prepared for these. So this is looking to shape up like a very fun month. Probably the worst month of football I ever saw was Sean McDermott year 1, that stretch in November, where the Bills just got run all over. There's that Saints game was in the middle of
Saints,
it. The Chargers,
even the horrible Jets loss.
The Tyrod getting benched, all that stretch, that was the worst I've ever sat through. I thought about quitting being a fan. This could turn out to be the best month we've ever had.
Our man Bruce here watching. Obviously, NFL coaches would never hide anything. Yes. NFL teams are beacons of truth and transparency.
Yes, they are.
Appreciate you checking us out, Bruce. Always appreciate you. It's something that I even, I had hedged a bit coming into this last game that, hey, maybe they're going to take it easy with Matt Milano. He played 100% of snaps. He was on the field for every single play. So obviously, that they're not going to proactively hedge on snaps. If someone's ready to play and they're the best player, they're going to play. I don't think you could have any better example than a soft tissue injury with Matt Milano going up against Derrick Henry, where AJ Klein would have been just fine coming in there and throwing his body around. And the fact they didn't, and Milano played every single snap, shows that those guys are going to play. Back to the schedule here. So coming out of that 3-game stretch, that's very nice. The next one kind of ramps up a little bit more. You have home for the Colts down in New Orleans at the Saints on Thanksgiving night, and then home for the Patriots on Monday night. So I bring that up, that stretch where we do have an early bye, and I'm not a huge fan of that. And then we come back week 8, 9, 10, 11,
and we have like a 3-week bye.
But then week 12 into New England, where you go from a Thursday night to a Monday night.
Right.
It's 11 days where you get a little bit of a break. And at that point in week 12 and 13, I think that's going to come in handy. Now, the turnaround from the Colts to the Saints is tough late in the season, but having the bye early and then having that stretch later, I think that's going to end up coming in handy. But that's a tough stretch there with, obviously we both have them 3-0 with Dolphins, Jags, Jets. For Colts at Saints, Patriots, what do you have them in that stretch?
I don't remember what I had them at in my predictions. I'd have to go back and look at that. But for now, for the Colts and Saints, so these 2 teams, Colts, I can't really figure out. I feel like there's a point in time where they can kind of turn it around and go on a run. So I hope that doesn't happen until after the Bills game. But I think they have enough talent on that team to get it right at some point and put together some nice stuff. But I don't think they can do it against the Bills. I don't think they just right now they don't have the weapons to do it against Buffalo. And Saints, I can't figure out who they are, what type of team that is. That is, sometimes I watch them and I'm like, damn, that could be a tough game. And then other times I see them and I'm like, the Bills could blow them by 30. So I don't know
they
who
do have a good defense. They do have Alvin Kamara, but
they have playmakers. But I could see this defense and Sean McDermott, Leslie Frazier just feasting on Jameis still. Jameis still puts the ball out there to allow them to take it away.
Same with Wentz in that Colts game.
Yeah, I think the Bills will have a very nice Thanksgiving. I think we'll see Josh eating more turkey legs with Trey White probably. And then did you ask me going into the Patriots game, those full three?
Yeah.
I'm honestly thinking, we talked about this in the prediction shows, and I think you were trying to back me off of it a little bit and how hard it is to sweep your division 1 year, let alone 2 years in a row. I really think it's on the table here. I don't see any of these teams on paper or what I've seen from them on film. Anything can happen, but if I'm making a prediction, I think the Bills continue their streak and sweep the AFC East again. So I'm giving them a dub against the Pats here.
Well, and is any division a bigger differentiation now than it was preseason than the AFC East? I mean, everyone was talking up how, man, the Jets are up and coming. They might be dangerous. Oh,
Miami was like guaranteed a wild card.
Yeah, Miami's guaranteed wild card might challenge Buffalo for the division. And hey, maybe the Dolphins are even better. Could they have 3 playoff teams? And that does not look to be the case right now. The Jets are rightfully one of the worst teams in the NFL. The Dolphins are playing like one of the worst teams at 1-5. And although the Patriots, they've had some rough losses for their 2-4, they're obviously not talented enough to overcome any mistakes.
Yeah, they're annoyingly good and can hang in a game.
I'll guarantee at least one of our games against the Patriots is unnecessarily frustrating and anxiety-ridden, even if we win.
Yeah. They're the Bills with Trent Edwards, where they're like, it can hang in games, but they just don't have the firepower to
eventually the other team just does enough. Right. Then the stretch comes in for easily the hardest stretch remaining in the schedule, and that's at Buccaneers, home for the Panthers, at the Patriots. So obviously the Buccaneers in Tampa Bay is the only game the rest of the schedule where the Bills are not going to be favored. The Panthers have been much tougher than people have anticipated coming into the year, and that game's going to be flexed into, my guess is, the Saturday night game, the 8 o'clock primetime game. So that's going to be another night primetime game, another late night for us. And then,
so will that be a short week? That's coming off Monday
night? So it's
no, that's a regular Sunday game. The Bucs game is a Sunday game.
Yeah. So that one's going to be fine. It's a little bit short going from home Patriots Monday night into Tampa Bay, a road game on a short week. That's at least one less day. Then maybe coming back, depending on how that one gets flexed. I won't be shocked if that actually gets flexed to the 12-18 game, or maybe the Sunday night game on 12-19. We'll see where that one goes with the Panthers, but still a tough game with the Panthers. And then if one game is going to be tougher for the Patriots, the road game would probably be tougher than the home game. Sure. So that 3-game stretch is probably the toughest stretch, in my opinion, at Bucks, home for Panthers, at Patriots.
Yeah, let's not lie. Like that first Patriots game too is going to be a physical game. Like the Patriots are going to play you in a physical manner.
Their defense is still very good.
Yes, and their offense is going to pound on your line and try to force you to stop them in the run game. So that could be, even though the Bills should easily win it, it could take its physical toll heading into this next stretch here. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. I'm not going to pick the Bills to beat the Bucks. I think Vegas is probably right now to have them as the favorite this far out. I'm sure they will be the favorite in that game.
And I think Buffalo would be slightly favored in Buffalo.
Sure. The Bucks don't scare me. I think a lot of people, in my opinion, overstate how good they are. I think they're a good team. I think Super Bowl competitor team, but this isn't a team where I'm not, like, I don't want to match up against or I'm scared.
Their secondary has that is going to be a high scoring shootout.
Yes.
Like that secondary is not going to shut down the Bills. Now their defensive line might cause some problems. We'll get to that.
Right.
But that certainly is not going to be a.
So, like, for instance, I will talk about a little bit more later. I was telling you earlier, the Bills' true toxic differential, when you add up all the toxic interceptions and everything, fumbles, is plus 27. Tampa Bay's is plus 5. And that's because their defense is just getting gashed for big plays constantly. So this is a team that scares me. I think the Bills can beat them, but I'm not going to pick it for the sake of this conversation. I do think the Bills will win or lose at least one more game here this year. I think more than 2. I don't think they'll lose more than 2 the rest of the year here. And so I think Carolina will be another tough game. But again, I'm happy for Sam Darnold to have some of the success that he's had getting away from the Jets, but this isn't there's not a quarterback on that team that scares me. No. And what Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier and this defense, and who I even though they had a tough game, I still think they're going to be a top 10, top 8 defense in the NFL. So I think they're going to be able to handle business still against Carolina. And then, again, another physical game against the Patriots. So I think they'll win that game, but this is a tough stretch where they could drop 2 games. Sure. In those 2 games I said they might lose. And it's also going to be physical. This is good defenses. This is a stretch of talented defenses. Got both teams that are going to play physical. So this is one of those stretches to watch. And this is right around the time of year where you and I, Greg, start talking about what you want your team to look like when you're playing in this stretch here late in the season as you're ramping up to get to the playoffs and starting to build that streak up before you hit the playoffs. And so this is their hardest stretch, but also the most important to really get it right and be the team we're going to see in the playoffs.
I think Spin is spot on here. I think 14-3 most likely gets the first seed. I think 13-4 would be a coin flip for the first seed based on tiebreakers and who does what. Where one of those
who's going to win 15 games?
No one. But say this weekend, if Kansas City beats Tennessee, and then all of a sudden Buffalo, Tennessee, and Kansas City are in the running, they're all knocked out because Buffalo beat Kansas City beat Tennessee, right. Tennessee beat Buffalo. Now all of a sudden the head-to-head's gone. Those are all knocked out. The Bills don't play Baltimore or the Chargers. So getting conference wins, which, like you said, sweeping the division is huge. Big. If the losses are the Buccaneers,
North is going to be ugly.
Oh, yeah.
That's going to be real messy.
Battle each other back and forth. Yeah. Heck, the Bengals are 4-2 and looking frisky.
That's what I'm saying.
If the Bills' losses are the Buccaneers and one of the Saints or Panthers games, all of a sudden they win the rest of those conference games. That has a huge impact on the tiebreakers that are there. And depending on how it's looking, say they get to where they've only lost 1 game and they have 2 games left, and now you're sitting there at, it's 1 more loss, so now they're at 3 losses at that point, and with 2 games to go, you're sitting there at 12-3, but it's looking pretty good. The Bills' benefit is their final 2 games are at home for the Falcons, at home for the Jets. Yeah. And those more 2 FCS. Games where at that point in the year, week 17, week 18, those teams are going to have nothing to play for. They're going to be playing young guys, looking ahead. Those are games where, Mitch Trubisky might be able to get wins in those games if you're sitting people. And Sean McDermott's going to have the option of, hey, do we already have a seed locked up? Do we already have something in control? If not, he's shown they're going to keep the pedal down. Totally. Heck, they put it. They
did it into the Miami game. Even
they didn't need Miami. They had nothing to gain in that game, and they still put it on them for 56 points.
Right.
They're going to keep their foot down to some standpoint, but they're going to have that option. Anybody who doesn't need to play isn't going to need to play, or is going to get pulled out pretty quickly. They're going to be able to, if there's guys going for statistical thresholds, they're pretty good about letting guys push for that. They have a nice flexibility with those final 2 games in the Falcons and the Jets where they can play it to their own preference and just finish out strong, 14-3. But hey, if they're sitting there at 12-3 and the next best team is 10-5 and you have a 2-game lead going in with those final 2, you can start to rest guys. You can start to give guys a break. You can now give yourself an extra rest going into even a bye week in the playoffs and get yourself really healthy and tuned up. So this schedule really sets up well for an exciting run here. I think we're going to see some nice win streaks. I think we're going to see some really dominant performances with huge statistical outputs. And I think it's going to give people a lot of excitement going into what's going to be a very exciting year. And I think, your prediction and Spin, I don't expect more than 2 more losses. I think the 13-4 is a very reasonable outcome of what to expect here. If something weird happens, maybe 12-5, but I think 14-3 is absolutely in play.
Yeah, and that was right around where I was in the preseason prediction on Anthony's disguised coverage show. I brought this up when we got to these last 2 games. I was saying then, I was like, I think there's going to be a good chance with the 17 game season that the Bills will have that flexibility of 2 games instead of just the final week 16 like we were used to. They have 2 weeks opportunity with some flexibility, and maybe it's not all players for 2 weeks, but maybe there's somebody that's got a lingering injury that they just keep out and kind of patch together a roster and get a look at some of these younger guys in games that maybe won't matter as much. But I definitely see it shaping out that way now that we're 6 weeks into, they're heading into the 7th week here into the season. I see it shaping out just the way that we saw the schedule in the beginning of the season. And I think that this Bills team is actually better than I projected that they were going to be in the Bills season or in the preseason. I thought there was a chance a little bit more regression on the offensive side of the ball, and I was getting a little concerned after week 1. All those concerns are kind of going by the wayside with this offense right now. And I don't think that the defense is record-breaking 2000 Ravens or 85 Bears or anything like that.
But they've clearly shown they can be 2018, 2019 Bills.
Totally.
That level,
absolutely.
Which were both top 5 units.
Yes, and don't let this one Tennessee game fool you that this defense still isn't really good. Every single defense, if you go back and look up the Ravens defense, those Bears defense, they all gave up 30-something points to teams 1 or 2 times in those totally elite seasons. So it's okay to give up a number of points to a team. I don't think when the way the schedule shapes up, I don't see a lot of these teams besides maybe Tampa. If Carolina beats the Bills, it's because their defense keeps the Bills into a low scoring game, right? They're not going to come out into a shootout of 30 plus points. Not a lot of teams are going to be able to put up 30 on this Bills team. And you're seeing league wide scores go crazy. So the Bills statistically, I think will without a doubt be in the top 10, without maybe top 5 with the years out. So it's lining up real well. The Bills are actually better than I thought they were. And some of these teams, like we talked about, especially in the AFCs, are a lot worse than I thought they were. And so it makes this schedule feel even lighter than it did looking at it in the preseason.
Yeah, the Chiefs seem more pedestrian than what I expected them to be, more of a juggernaut that we were struggling to keep
Browns
up with.
Even, potentially seeing them in the playoffs. They don't look as tough. Colts, a big one. Preseason, I thought the Colts were going to be a real threat again because I think they won the game in the playoffs by every measure that I would count a football game. Bills won the game. And so that was a team that concerned me, but not as much. And I don't even know what team we are going to see when we face them, but not a team that concerns me in the same way.
So let's pivot over here. We'll go to our friends over at Uncle Jumbo's. Our Uncle Jumbo's spotlight.
No game this week. We don't have to do it. Sorry, Uncle Jumbo.
No. And I think if you're going to spotlight a player, I'll use what will kind of lean into somewhat the rest of the show. Some of the things is now we talked about the schedule. We talked about the team overall. Let's talk about some of the position groups. We're not going to go through every single player on the roster here, but some of the guys that we expect. Who's off to a hot start that we think will continue or could slow down? Who's someone that maybe hasn't quite had the opportunity yet or hasn't done as well as we thought that we think might bounce back? And we'll start obviously, where everything starts with the Bills, and that's with Josh Allen. So obviously at this point,
you just want to trap me into on pace.
Yes, I just want to show you. Yeah, obviously it starts out with the per game numbers, and for anyone who is looking for some huge regression, even with a couple ugly games and some weird weather, Josh Allen is 65% completion percentage, 287 games, would put him on pace for 4,800 yards, 3 interceptions so far, so on pace for 8 interceptions on the year. 2.5 touchdown per game, 15 touchdowns, on pace for 42 passing touchdowns, and still running the ball pretty well. 214 rushes, which is on pace for 606, and 6 rushing touchdowns. He's on pace for 5,400 total yards and 48 total touchdowns.
Yeah.
So, is it perfect in every single game? Is it, exactly what the most, fine-tuned, intricate performance is every game? No, but it's still incredibly good, and he is an MVP caliber quarterback. And after doling out $253 million, it's hard to expect anything more than that.
Yeah, he's a top 2 to 3 quarterback in the NFL today, right now. He's better than Patrick Mahomes has been so far in this season today, right now. Even with bad performance and a pedestrian half of the second game, and he's still putting up statistics that I think you could put on par with any of these guys. I think Josh Allen's absolutely going to get another MVP vote, especially if the season goes how we just projected it to the rest of the way. I think
there's going to be some really nice stats in some of those games.
Absolutely. If he doesn't get the MVP, he'll at least receive more votes again. And I think that absolutely confirms and totally obliterates any conversations about it was a one-hit wonder, possible regression in him. That'll be who he is. This will be the guy that he is moving forward. And I mean, he put the team on his back in this last game. I think this was maybe, to me, one of the best performances for Josh, because he really, the entire game, dragged them to keep them within this big heavyweight fight where they were getting punched back and forth. What was it, 7 lead changes or something? This is 6 or 7 lead changes.
I was nitpicking after the game that he should have had a 4th and a 5th touchdown pass because he didn't see Emmanuel Sanders in the end zone. He still had the 350 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, this is a guy that is carrying your team against good teams and dragging them along. So any concern about regression, totally out the window. Clearly the MVP of this team at the bye week and will be the MVP. And if they're the best team in the league, you better win the MVP.
Right now, Kyler Murray is 6-0. There's certainly nothing wrong with giving him the leader in the clubhouse. Lamar Jackson has looked really good. He also looked horrible against Detroit. Yeah. Kyler looked ugly against San Francisco. They've each had their flawed games. I think I say this a lot.
Herbert was kind of creeping up in that running for a second. And he had a terrible game.
Looked horrible against Baltimore. And I think, Joe Marino is a big advocate of this on his show and talks about, watch other teams as critically as you watch the Bills. Like, we are incredibly critical of every little thing with the Bills. You just don't watch other teams that way. You're not nitpicking, is the left guard getting blown up on this play the way that we might watch John Feliciano. You're just not watching to that degree. You're not saying,
is the second cornerback giving up any receptions?
Yeah, how many did he give up 2 or did he give up 4? Because that 4 is unacceptable.
Huge difference.
Or hey, I saw a couple big hits out of their middle linebacker, but how many? Was he making enough impact plays to really be? We don't watch other teams that way, and all of a sudden, then you just see the highlights of these other teams. And if you're going to watch the highlights of Lamar Jackson and Kyler Murray, of course they look like an MVP. They're amazing players. The highlights, of course, look great. But I'll tell you, I was there in person to watch the Cardinals and the Browns this past weekend. Kyler Murray is not a perfect player. He had some ugly passes. He had some weird, wasted runs. He bailed out of some pockets that there was nobody there. There was no reason to bail out of the pocket. He is not some perfect player. They all have the same kind of nitpick elements that you would pick nits with Josh Allen. But he's now in that discussion with those kind of guys. You just expect really good performances, and we're now going to nitpick those kind of crazy passing lines where, I know he threw for 335 and 3 touchdowns, but man, he could have had one more if he had seen this one guy over here.
Right.
Yeah. So now moving into some of the other ones, I'll just say the offense in general. We're not going to go through every single group. We'll start on the lower side and then we'll finish on the higher side. Who's maybe someone who's gotten off to a hot start that you're maybe not sure is going to continue to sustain at exactly that level?
Off to a hot start and not being able to sustain? That one's tough. I don't know of anyone that has started hot that I think Dawson Knox is actually who he is. I think that this start that he has,
I'd say the 2 candidates would be Dawson Knox or Emmanuel Sanders, just because they're playing really well.
Right. I think that. So I think Knox is who he is. I think that this level of production that he had is totally sustainable so far. He hasn't been beating a total world beater in every game. I think it's sustainable what he's doing right now. Emmanuel Sanders, I don't think stats will probably take a dip at some point in the season as other guys. We saw this 2 weeks in a row where Cole Beasley really had no stats. I think Emmanuel Sanders will have a couple weeks where he's
he's on pace for 1,170 yards and 11 touchdowns. Yeah. I don't know that he's going to hit those levels.
He's gonna, because even Diggs has had some weeks where he hasn't been as involved. Emmanuel Sanders will have that at some point. Some of those stats will sort of get settled in, and I don't think his on pace is going to be what you just said it was. So. But I think he'll still be playing. Yeah,
and for as iffy as Stephon Diggs, people feel like he's been, the dude's on pace for over 1,300 yards again. Yeah. Like, he's still been really good, and he hasn't even had that monster game yet.
Somebody on Twitter was like, "Oh, he needs to have this," and like, really, does he? Because he's actually been playing super productive.
He's been really good
football. Yeah, no, and I thought last game he had a pretty monster game.
There's only 4 players in the NFL who have had 60+ yards from scrimmage every week so far. It's Derrick Henry, Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, And I'm going to draw a blank who the fourth one is. But Stephon Diggs is one of the four.
Right.
Along with Cooper Kupp and Derrick Henry and guys that people are going crazy about, Stephon Diggs is also the other guy who's had 60-plus yards every single week. He's just there and dependable and someone that you can count on to be an elite receiver over and over again.
Bill Bassiner is asking, will Sanders break 1,000 yards? You just said he's on pace for over. I think it's going to be close. I think it will be. We know John Brown was a 1,000-yard wide receiver in this offense. We saw Cole Beasley and Stephon Diggs get that 1,000-yard receiving last year. I don't think Beasley will get the 1,000 yards. I think he'll have other quiet games this year, especially with the emergence of Dawson Knox. I think they'll try to get Gabe Davis involved as the season goes on.
Sanders would need 53 yards a game the rest of the way.
It's going to be tight.
Yeah, he's going to be right there. I don't think he keeps up. Right now, he's on pace for over 1,100. I think that comes back a little bit.
I could see him like 859.
Yeah, I think he's over 900. I think he's over 900, and I won't be. All it would take is one more game where he hits on one or two of those deep balls where all of a sudden he ends up with 130 instead of 60, and then he's going to hit it. All he needs is one more of those big games because he's going to get 40, 50, 60 yards every single game.
Sure.
It's just he's too good at getting open downfield, and Josh Allen is too talented. He's going to have two or three of those 10, 15, 20 yarders every game.
And as long as Diggs is productive, he's going to continue to draw always the attention.
He has his own gravity on the field. He pulls that safety attention towards him.
Yeah.
How about the other way? Maybe someone we haven't seen much from on the offense yet that you expect to improve down the stretch.
I think we're going to see continued improvement from this running back room. I think that I like some of the stuff that I've seen. We still haven't had either one of these guys really have a totally breakout game yet, and I don't know if they're going to be able to, the way that they sort of feed hot hands and switch guys back and forth. But I think we're going to see continued improvement out of Moss and the way that Moss runs. We saw the patience this last week where he got one and kind of just hesitated behind the line, found the hole, and went forward. Every game I see this guy, I see him running in a better way, with more patience, with more, quick cuts back and forth. I just continue to see him grow every time he touches the ball. I really do actually like what we've seen out of Singletary too. He ran pretty nasty against the Titans and set that tone with that first run. We've seen him be a little bit more slippery this year. So those guys, I think, will have opportunities as the season gets a little bit longer. Some of these games have the potential for some big blowouts where we're going to lean on the run a little bit more. I still think, as much of a passing team as this is, I think Sean McDermott would like the ability to be a running team as we head towards the playoffs. Yes, PJ, just notice Aaron Sines, shout out to NSYNC. I was a big NSYNC fan from like 2000 to 2003 high school years.
Very much to envision you with frosted tips.
I had frosted hair, gelled up, doing bye at school dances.
You even had the Timberlake look with the curls early on.
Totally. Yeah, no, for sure. I loved it. What was I talking about? Anyway, running backs. I think the running backs have the most upside in this offense. I think Cole Beasley, we know who he is. The rest of the receivers, we know who they are. We know who Josh Allen is. The offensive line, I don't know that anyone is going to improve that much. Maybe Spencer Brown improves as the year goes on. I think he could be a candidate for it. Who do you got?
I'll even put it out there that I think the fact that there was a midseason switch and there's a third-round rookie, I think that just more time on task and now some time to gel, I think we can see improved performance from the offensive line. It's not all of a sudden going to become a strength. We have an average offensive line. I think we have a slightly above average pass blocking offensive line and an average offensive line overall. And I think that it can improve slightly to maybe above average as the season goes. We have better depth than many teams, although, Ike Botker and Cody Ford are not amazing players. They're better than a lot of other teams.
Don't leave out Bates. Don't
third
let the
and
Bates.
Fourth. We have Ike Botker and Cody Ford. So going through that kind of thing, maybe we see some development from Tommy Doyle, also an athletic project kind of piece. There are things where I think we can see some additional performance. We still have Cody Ford getting back into shape on things. I think he's gotten a lot of negative press from one really bad play. He was actually the best offensive lineman in that game. Like he got blown up by Jeffrey Simmons on the 4th and 1. He was perfectly fine the rest of that game. He was not consistently
Dawkins, you mean?
getting... Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Deion
Sorry, you said
Dawkins.
forward for a second. I was
Okay,
like, oh,
I
wait.
apologize. No. Deion Dawkins was very,
Yes.
very good against the Titans. I get it.
Yes.
He got blown up by Jeffrey Simmons on a horrible play
Yeah.
that he was trying to reach on a down block and got off balance, and a really powerful defensive tackle knocked him back on a critical play, and that sucks. And he looked bad, and I'm sure he's embarrassed and frustrated. Go find me another horrible rep in that game. He was not. Spencer Brown was the guy getting beat around the end over and
For
over
sure.
again.
And
Deion Dawkins was
getting
not.
beat a lot.
Yeah, Feliciano got whooped multiple times. The handoffs between Morse and Feliciano got beat. Darrell Williams is pretty good, and Deion Dawkins was good almost that entire game. Like, yes, it sucks that the critical play that we needed him, he got blown up. Deion Dawkins was really good. Like, he was good the rest of the game. He was not the guy getting beat. The reason that you never heard Bud Dupree's name the whole time, when you heard the announcer saying, "Oh, well, that's the first time we've heard Bud Dupree's name," or "Oh, this would be a good time for Bud Dupree to make his first play," it's because Deion Dawkins shut him down the entire game.
Right.
That's why.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
So,
I'm not worried about Dawkins at all. I would say.
I think that right side could gel a little bit more, and we could see better performance. Not all of a sudden great, but better performance as the year goes on. And a player like Spencer Brown, with the athletic gifts he has, is a logical person that will get better. He just played his third game ever. He needed. It was humbling. It was a very humbling third game. He got beat pretty good in that game. He was, probably our worst lineman right there with Feliciano in that game. That's a fine wake up call and kind of humble pie for a really athletic, talented guy. I think he's going to be able to improve as the year goes on, because that was literally his third game ever.
Yeah, I do think this is a tough stretch for him where now teams have tape on him, right? There's a few games of tape where his tendencies are now there, and he's a rookie. And I think you saw a number of times with some of the looks that the Titans were giving, whether it's stunts and some of the blitzes that they were given, was to attack that side of the line, knowing that they haven't played together a long time and that this kid's only in his third.
You can beat Spencer Brown at counter moves.
Yeah.
If you show him the outside and then counter back in, he's not ready for it yet.
Yes, and so you got this stuff on tape, and so his tendencies are there, and so this is going to be a tough stretch, and that's I'm interested to see how his development is now in the bye week, because this is self-scout week. Your tendencies are on tape for others, and they're on tape for you. Can he self-correct some of these tendencies and not be the point that's getting attacked all the time? And then, we mentioned it earlier, John Feliciano. I think he's one of the few players on this offense that falls into the category. You said guys that haven't been performing well, they're going to get better, or guys that have been performing well, they're going to get worse. I think John Feliciano hasn't been performing well, and I don't see it getting better anytime soon. And I don't see an answer. I don't see any guards out on the market. I don't see potential trades for guards. They're valuable league wide.
Somebody on Twitter asked me earlier about Andrew Norwell again.
Sure. Yeah,
just languishing down there in Jacksonville.
Teams don't. It's hard because most teams don't even have one good guard, let alone two. And so there's not a lot of these guys available. And I don't know, maybe Jacksonville. I don't think Jacksonville is in the position.
Well, let's use them as an example.
Sure.
So if you're looking for teams that are going to want to trade someone, you're going to want a veteran who's probably paid a little bit more than the team wants on a really bad losing, rebuilding team. However, so Jacksonville checks every box. Andrew Norwell is, 29-30. He's being paid quite a bit. It's still like $6 million the rest of this year.
Sure.
And then is in a position where you have to figure out how to fit next year, which is still like $13 million for next year. Which all those things you can do. Brandon Beane could figure that out if they wanted to. The Jags just invested everything they have in Trevor Lawrence. Do you want to give up probably your best lineman to trying to keep him upright and being able to do that? No. I don't know that they just want to give that away. Now
they might. They're just pretty dysfunctional, but you shouldn't do that.
They should not. But it would take, short of a mistake by another franchise, we're not going to get an upgrade. Hell, the Titans just claimed Bobby Hart off the Bills practice squad onto their active roster. That is the state of available offensive linemen around the NFL. The Titans just said, "Oh, well, Bobby Hart's better than what we got. We better add him." That gives you an idea of how rough things are around the rest of the NFL.
Yeah, no, I don't see an improvement to that, and that's probably the one thing that's causing me concern. And it's starting to cause me concern because it makes Mitch Morse look bad. I know Mitch Morse is a good center, and he's going to have good games and bad games, but I think the weight of having to carry John Feliciano constantly is something that is a huge
Any
disservice.
one-on-one blocks, Morris was fine.
Yeah.
All the issues were the handoffs between him when
Yes.
they were doing the stunts and trying to communicate who was taking who. Those were where the issues came from. And
Yeah, I think I'm going to have a dissertation on this at some point after his career here. But I think on terms of players that have been given a disservice by this front office, it's been very few players. But I think Mitch Morris has been given a disservice by this front office and who they've put next to him so far in his career, because he's had to do so much work on that interior. When you see the all-22 and that end zone angle, and you see Mitch Morris just going back and forth and just trying to protect a leaky interior, the work he does is not appreciated enough by this fan base. And when we see a PFF grade that's like a below average grade and everybody's like, well, Mitch Morris isn't that good. Like, trust me, he is. It's the players around him. And that bums me out.
yeah, Spin even brought up here, Bobby Hart was the second player claimed off the Bills practice squad after Jack Anderson.
Yeah.
So two of it, that goes to show you the depth of issues around the NFL.
Yeah.
That, you know, that's how desperate teams are. I'll throw one other name out there. I won't be shocked if in this stretch without Dawson Knox we see a little more Gabe Davis.
Sure.
I don't think they're going to go from, you know, barely any 10
Or will it be
personnel
Evan
to
Ingram?
all of a sudden four wide receiver sets all the time. I think we'll see a bit more, and I do think they like Gabe Davis's size without Dawson Knox in there. Davis does come in on some rundowns. He can do some other things. So not that they're going to use him like a pseudo tight end, but that he can be a size element that Cole Beasley doesn't bring. So I think we might see a little bit more out of Gabe Davis in this stretch here than what we've seen so far. I was, you know, one out there telling people, especially from a fantasy standpoint, hey, don't put your eggs in that basket. Emmanuel Sanders is going to be the guy, not Gabe Davis. Obviously, I'll take any opportunity to toot my own horn.
Yeah.
But even I didn't anticipate 6 catches 6 games into the year. I didn't think it was going to drop quite that low. So it's even been lower.
That's because you were a Dawson Knox hater.
Yeah, honestly, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. If you told me that one of those two was going to have 21 catches for 286 and 5 touchdowns right now, I would have bet you a bunch that was Gabe Davis. Yeah, that's perfect. Not that many catches, but some longer plays and higher touchdown rate. That sounds just like Gabe Davis. Emmanuel Sanders will have more catches and yards, but Davis will be the big play guy. And instead, it was Dawson Knox, and I was very wrong on Dawson Knox. So, and someone in the chat, I wish I could give him credit for where it was, said, oh, sure, Dawson Knox breaks his hand right after he learns how to catch. That made me laugh at that way it was. Let's pivot over to the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, up until this last game, there was some exceptional play overall, but still some questions here or there. So maybe who are some guys that stood out for you of whether you expect it to continue, or guys you think could develop further, or guys that maybe might slow down even if that's the standpoint.
Yeah, I don't know. Many guys will slow down. Maybe, you know, you and I have talked offline a little bit about where Jerry Hughes is at. And I'm a believer that there's still a lot of juice there, and he's still not hitting home. Like, this is a Jerry Hughes problem where he generates pressures. He doesn't get home. It is crazy because he's right. He creates so much havoc, and it just doesn't result in sacks. And we haven't even seen a result in sacks with Rousseau on the other side of him pushing those sacks and generating those.
Jerry's still number 1 on the team in pressures, 18 pressures. Absolutely.
He's played pretty disruptive, but I can see him at any point hitting a wall, right? We know Father Time is undefeated. Mario Addison's really in the same boat where I've actually really liked the production that Addison has been able to get and the type of disruption. Both those guys have been super important to why this defense is where they're at so far this year. Potentially either one of those guys could hit the wall. Outside of that, I think everyone else is going to continue to go up. Maybe Star. We could maybe throw Star in, a guy that
Star's
could at any
off to
point,
a pretty hot start.
That could mellow out a little bit. He's playing at a whole nother level, but the rest of these guys I think are young enough and at points in their career where they are still ascending and the ascension can continue. I'm not sure anyone's going to really decrease all that much from where they're at. I think Tremaine Edmonds is ascending at a rapid pace here and stacking weeks on top of each other. I think that's going to continue. Milano had a bit of a quiet week, but he was still good in this past game. And I think he is who he is. You know, Poyer and Hyde are who they are. We're not going to see really probably an ascension from 2 of the best safeties in the league, but you're going to see the consistency we've seen. Trey is going to be
both
consistent.
had more turnovers than we normally see.
Totally.
You know, that's, I mean,
and that could continue with this slate of quarterbacks they're going to go up against.
Yeah, that's very exciting. to be able to see. But Micah Hyde has 3 interceptions. Jordan Poyer has 2. I don't know that they're going to both end up with 6 and 7 or 8.
Yeah, they're going to end up with double
interceptions on
digits
the year.
between the two of them, probably.
Yeah.
Most
So
likely.
the 2 of them have 5 now. If they both have 5 more the rest of the season with 11 games, that would be really impressive. If they have 10 together between the 2 of them, that would be huge. Right now, they're on pace for like 16 between the 2 of them. I don't anticipate that we're going to see that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
A couple of the defensive line part before we
Yeah.
go into some of the other guys. I think that you're right there. I agree completely in that, Star's off to a really hot start. I don't know for sure that we see that. Here, a couple of people have brought up, PJ brought up about AJ Epinesa. That game does look a bit like an anomaly. He's had 1 or 2 pressures in all the rest of the games. He had 8 in the Miami game. It was a dominant, crazy performance.
That Miami game was weird pressure-wise, too. Just everyone was eating that.
It's encouraging because when you display a skill and show the capability to perform at that level, that means it's within you. That means it is there. It is possible for that to occur. I think we could see progression from him in the sense of, hey, maybe some more 3 and 4 pressure games, not as many 1 and 2. We're not going to see more 8 pressure games. There's only been a handful of those in the entire NFL by like Aaron Donald doesn't have any 8 pressure games. Like those are really impressive performances. And I think some of the other guys there, you also have, I think we can see some progression from Ed Oliver. He's been really good, but it hasn't always netted out in, in the right way. Ed Oliver, he's been phenomenal against the run and had some nice plays against the pass, not quite as many. Greg Rousseau all his performance is pure athletic ability and raw talent. He has no pass rush move combinations. He hasn't learned a lot from
got
a hand
washed
usage
on
standpoint.
that run.
Yeah, yes. He's had a couple where he really gets worked, and he's just scratching the surface of his talent.
Yeah.
I'll say maybe someone that could go back. I think maybe there's an unfair expectation. Boogie Basham has a sack in both games he's played.
That was a coverage sack. The first one.
He's looked fine. I've had some people go crazy that, oh man, I can't believe we didn't play Boogie. He's looking so amazing. His highlights have been fine. A lot of the other plays have been very iffy. He has a lot to learn. He also has no repertoire whatsoever. He has power and he tries to spin. Power and he tries to spin. Power and he tries to spin. That's his thing. That's all he knows how to do right now.
Yeah, and he'll have the motor to keep working. But...
Correct. They have the right kind of guys to be able to do that. But I do expect that to kind of continue at the same pace.
Obata is probably a guy in this line that I pounded the table for and haven't seen. Like, he's been fine when he's been out there. He had the injury early. And that
had 3 pressures against Kansas City, but he didn't really show much at all against Tennessee. And that's the guy... It wouldn't have been Harrison Phillips. Harrison Phillips was going to play. They needed the extra defensive tackle.
Right.
It's perfectly fine to now question, hey, should they have played Epinesa or Boogie instead of Obata? That may be a fair question.
But I think that'll be debated here through the end of the year. I think that rotation will be game dependent and matchup dependent. And I don't think that there's a huge drop off between the 3. I think all 3 are flawed. All 3 offer different upside in different areas. And that's the versatility that Sean McDermott wants to have a game day active that's good enough to start.
Brian asks a good question here. Any reason why you break up a winning lineup? Why not ride a hot hand? It's because this team is game plan dependent. Just like in Miami, we had 13 targets to Cole Beasley, and then all of a sudden people were asking, oh, is he being phased out? No, this team specifically game plans against what the other team doesn't do. Against Kansas City, where they never run the ball and all they do is pass, of course you want Epinesa and Obata in there, and we only had 2 defensive tackles dressed for the game. That was it. All we had was Ed Oliver and Starr. That was it. Nobody else, no other defensive tackles played. When you play against Derrick Henry and Tennessee in the most run heavy team in the NFL, yeah, of course you're going to want more defensive tackles and more size and more bulk. AJ Epinesa is small. Obata and Harrison Phillips are much bigger than him. They want the size. So it's game plan specific. They're not going to ride the hot hand when it doesn't make sense against the team. Now, if it was another pass happy team and they thought that would fit, sure, then stick with what's working, but don't do it to your detriment if it doesn't fit the scheme and the game plan.
And especially when it's not like a core player along the
Yeah.
defensive line. The numbers alone give you the ability to have that flexibility to rotate your specific pieces. So,
and I can tell you from the film, AJ Epinesa and Boogie Basham did not earn undoubted confidence and praise that you couldn't remove them from the game. They both had plenty of down moments.
I mean, if anything, and this was a conversation I think you and I have also had offline here about the snap count distribution along the defensive line.
Jessica was right. I did miss Justin Zimmer. We did have
yes.
Although Zimmer's the size of Oliver. He's also small too. He's like 285 pounds.
Totally. There's been a lot of talk about the snap count and that Jerry Hughes might be getting too much of a share of that count. People would like to see Epinesa get more of that, and people get more of that. And I think there's fair arguments for it, but there's a reason that Epinesa's has actually gone the other way, and Jerry Hughes is increased here over the last couple of games, where I do think that week 2 was a bit of an anomaly, and then we saw some stuff on film that showed that maybe Epinesa needs to continue to work in slowly. I think those counts will change as the year goes on. I think they want Epinesa to grow as the year goes on.
I wouldn't hate Jerry closer to 50 than to 60, but he doesn't need to be in the 30s or 40s. He's still our best pass rusher. He's our most consistent pass rusher. You can't take him off the field. And people constantly hate on Mario Addison, and it's because of the contract, and that's fine.
Yeah.
He's still really good. Like, he's not, I take that back. He's still good. He's still a productive player. He still has 11 pressures and a sack and a strip sack fumble. He still is a productive player. He's still better than Boogie Basham. He's better than F.A. Obata. He's better than A.J. Epinesa in every game except for one. He's still a productive player, and they're actually being pretty careful with his snap counts. Overall on the season, he's playing 42%. Yeah. And in each game, he's had a couple games down at 29 and 32, and he's had most of the rest of the games in the mid-40s. They're not overusing him. He is a good rotational piece in the defensive line.
Yeah. Real quick, I'm going to swap out because I couldn't let this comment go. You know that I couldn't do it. Our boy Nick G here saying, why does Levi have a bad game when we need him the most? Levi didn't have a bad game, folks. I know that you've heard this from me 100 times. He had 2 bad receptions. I'll give him that. And they were big plays in this game.
Not all that different than my rant on Dan Dawkins. It's because of the moment when everybody was watching.
Yes, and when the defense couldn't make a stop, but the number of targets he got wasn't that bad considering Trey only gave up 1 target. Like, they only targeted against Trey White once. If you told me Trey's only going to get 1 target, I would expect Levi to have 6 or 7, 8 targets going his way, but he didn't. I think he had 6 targets on the game.
5 targets, 4
5 targets, 4 catches. And 2 of those catches were bad coverage. They were, and it's not a good matchup for him to be one-on-one man coverage with AJ Brown.
And unfortunately, 1 was on a 4th down, 1 was on a critical 3rd down. There were people were watching, and that AJ Brown's a phenomenal elite athlete, but it stinks that it was on a critical down.
Yeah, totally. And the other 2 catches that he gave up were pretty pedestrian. Guys in front of him in coverage, wrapped him up pretty quick, didn't give up much after it. So he actually had a pretty good game in run support too. So again, some of these things look bad because, like Greg said, it's the play that you need somebody to make a stop on that play. But other guys, I mean, the same thing. Eric posted Jermaine Edmonds gave up 6 receptions on 6 targets, but they weren't you got to look at the context of the receptions themselves. It wasn't a bad game. You can see that those targets and receptions and count that as bad. He actually was in good coverage. That's how they count receptions.
Yeah, correct. It just like he went on a rant, and I helped him rant about that they counted the Antonio Gibson touchdown against him, and it tanked his entire grade and gave him like a 29 for the game. You want to know what? Micah Hyde was a lot closer to Antonio Gibson at the time of the catch than Tremaine Edmonds was, and Micah Hyde was guarding that flat area. It should have been counted against Micah, even though it was a scheme breakdown and a unit breakdown. No one person was at fault for that. It was just the intern that works the PFF grading system is mandatory to assign the touchdown to one person. It's totally fluky. On that defense, Jessica here asking us to talk Vernon Butler. I'm not going to because you can't make me. I don't want to talk about him. I'm really glad he's been a healthy scratch most of the season. I hope he doesn't play the rest of the year. I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah, but as far as those bottom depth guys, I think he's fine for what he is. He's a guy that
fine as an 11th
needed,
defensive lineman.
Yes, if needed, in a bind, guys are hurt, he can come in and play and not be totally terrible. Like he can go in and have a fine game. I think, again, to the point Joe Marino makes and that you brought up earlier, watching other teams and other rosters with the same type of critical eye we give our own team when we say these guys are terrible. Like, look at the 4th defensive tackle on whatever the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, whatever team it is, they're probably Vernon Butlers.
Oh yeah. Heck, Daryl Johnson down in Carolina, he's played in 2 out of their 6 games for 5 snaps each.
Yeah.
He's got on the field for 10 total snaps, 5 snaps in each game for 2 games out of the 6, and 4 healthy scratches.
Yeah.
It's tough, and the depth around the NFL is hard to break through to be able to do those things. And Tremaine Edmonds is the other guy I wanted to bring up here. He's a guy who I think is off to a better start than people realized, is playing well, and I don't see any reason it's going to stop. I don't see any reason he's going to slow down. I'm not saying he's playing at an all-pro level. I'm not saying he's playing out of his mind and better than Fred Warner and Darius Leonard and people like that. I don't think he is. I think he's playing well. I think he's playing as well as we've seen him, and I think he'll continue to do that as the rest of the season goes.
He's not been the reason the Bills have gotten the ball moved on them, which he has been in the past. Good quarterbacks took advantage of him. He's corrected that issue. I think he's knocking on the door of that top tier middle linebacker in the NFL. If he can stack more games like he's had the last 3 weeks here and can continue to stack games like that, I think he's very much going to knock on the door in that conversation with those top guys. And I think his agent's going to be able to use a season like that, say he stacks another 6 weeks like he's had the last 3 weeks, that contract that he's going to get, that contract extension is going to be significant. I don't know if he's on the level of the Warners or Darius Leonard's yet, but his agent will have some ammo to use to get a contract that's similar.
That's an important one. And I went through, Eric asked me to put together kind of a estimate from a contract standpoint. And I think people immediately go to the contracts that we've seen from Darius Leonard and from Fred Warner and that level. And those guys have all pros on their resume that they go after. Tremaine Edmonds doesn't and hasn't played at that level. And there's not a lot of evidence to say that, he deserves that. But people then say, that you think he's trash and he drops out. No, the examples I use are Deion Jones and Miles Jack and Levante David and Shaq Thompson and Zach Cunningham, who are all also really good off-ball linebackers who also don't have all pros but have some Pro Bowls and have some really good performances and are also very, very good and not super elite. And they are all in the 12, 13, 14, $15 million range, not the 19 and $20 million range. So that's what I use. So I have him at $13.5 million a year. I have 4 years, $54 million, which is still more than Matt Milano, which will be frustrating for some people. And I'll be happy if Brandon Beane's negotiating tactic is just sliding a picture of Matt Milano across the table and showing them the number he signed for and saying, hey, you can try to say you're better than this guy. Tremaine Edmonds is younger, has a draft pedigree. There's a market, and he has 2 Pro Bowls, and Matt Milano has none, whether that's right, wrong, or indifferent.
Sure.
He's
the team captain.
Correct. He's a team captain. Milano isn't. I think there's pieces of that even though we might value, and many fans might value Milano more than him, and I think you can make a good argument that Milano has played better than him. I do think there's a market for his physical skills and his talent, but that doesn't mean the only 2 options aren't $10 million a year for Milano, $20 million a year for Darius Leonard and Fred Warner. He's in the middle. He's with Miles Jack and Deion Jones are really freaking good. They're very, very good, and they signed for $14 million and $13.5. That's what I think Tremaine Edmonds is going to get, because I don't think they're at Fred Warner, Bobby Wagner, Darius Leonard level. They're the next tier down.
I think he'll end up somewhere in the middle of those 2 tiers that you said. I do think
maybe 16 or something like that.
Sure, somewhere around there. I think, and they'll stack it so that it'll have more potential later. But I think they value. Sean McDermott's talked about it a number of times in these post-game press conferences and stuff like that. When they gave Tremaine Edmonds the game ball, even though he didn't seemingly have a very good game when they handed him the ball for that shutout, it was because he was the captain of the defense and he's the heart and soul of that defense. When Sean McDermott talks about stuff like that, it matters exponentially to a guy like that and to Brandon Beane. And I think that there's I agree. Matt Milano on film and when watching this defense is probably the MVP of this defense this year. I think Taron Johnson might be right there with him as well. A little shout out to my guy, but Matt Milano's the MVP of this defense so far. But
I'll make an argument for Micah Hyde, but
Micah
I
Hyde's
think it's
right
right
there
there
too. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Tremaine Edmonds is going to receive a bigger value inside this building because of his leadership ability and for being a 2-year captain on this defense. And that's something that doesn't show up in any quantitative spreadsheet or way we can define it, but it matters to the Buffalo Bills and they will pay for that type of stuff. We've seen it happen in the past. So he'll slide that picture of Milano, but then they'll also say, hey, we need you to be the leader and we're going to pay you to be the leader of this defense for the next 8 years.
Yeah. And those were the other names I wanted to bring up here. I think that we've seen Taron Johnson is earning every dollar of that contract, and $8 million a year was a nice payday for him. The team is paying for assuming he is going to continue to be consistent.
He's shown
and perform
since,
at the level we've seen, and he has this year. He has all of this year.
Even after getting paid, he's so far playing.
Just
I think
good.
Playing top 5 nickel slot corner in the NFL. All these guys that people have said, hey, when they were hit the market, I want to get that guy because he's for sure better than Taron. I think that Taron has made a case to at least be on the level of all.
He's going
guys.
to be that example now.
Yeah,
he's going to be that guy that people compare to, and that he's going to be comped to those things. And that's exactly what you want. He gave up 3 catches for 26 yards in that game against Tennessee. Yeah. He is consistently right there on the season. He's given up a passer rating against of 61.8. Yeah. He's given up less than half, 33 targets for 16 catches. Less than half the balls thrown at him get completed, and he does get targeted. Like they try to go after him, and he's
on the field every play.
It's pretty excellent. And then the other ones, 2 guys who have also signed extensions beyond their first deals. Man, we take for granted how good Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde are. I don't see any reason that's going to come back down. I think it was great to see. You saw several people talk about that they really are the best safety duo in the NFL. That it's just so they play off each other so well. You've seen Jordan Poyer, both of them making plays, but I love what I've seen from Poyer in the deep space this year. I've always loved him down in the box, but I thought he's looked really, really good playing center field this year, which hasn't always been his strength. And having that kind of versatility where you can move both of them around is just so valuable. It's been awesome.
Yeah, no, I will never take them for granted. I do think they're the best safety duo in the NFL. The thing that stinks for them is because they're both so good and they both make so many good plays that it sort of dilutes their individual value. Yeah. It really does. And so they might not make Pro Bowl. Like if they continue the interceptions, it's going to be hard to keep them out of Pro Bowls and anything like All Pro. But
I think they do both could make it this year.
Their power together is so strong that it devalues the individuals in the national. I'm not with the eyes of Bills fans, but in the national view, I think it hurts both of their stuff.
There were multiple national writers, media members, podcasts. I heard it on more than one tweet and more than one podcast of how much genuine respect there was on the open field play where Derrick Henry was going full speed. And Micah Hyde came up and met him. And he got crumpled and kind of held on as Henry got tackled.
Yeah, but he did it like a man.
Yeah, correct. And they said, no, not even joking.
Yeah.
There are a lot of guys in the NFL who would have done the business decision where you kind of try to grab on as he runs by, but you don't actually go at him to meet him and hit him when he has his entire full head of steam, 250 pounds, full go, 21 miles an hour, all the things that they showed there, and he stood himself right in front of him and hit him in the thighs and tried to take him down and did tackle him. Yeah. That earns a lot of respect around the NFL in that, no, it doesn't matter. He's putting himself in there and trying to go at it in that way. And, God bless him. That's, something
better him than me.
Yeah. Oh, good Lord. But that a lot of other people noticed as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. I think that when you talk to people that know football, like Belichick, it is, I think, great when they start asking him about his opponents, and Mike Tomlin's the same way. And when you listen to coaches like that every week, and when they start talking about the Bills defense, they immediately start talking about Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer as what causes the problems and the respect for their game. I think people that know football know.
Why do you think every rookie and young quarterback struggles against the Bills?
Yeah.
It's not just that Frazier and McDermott dream up these things, it's that those two are the weapons that
Oh,
they
I thought
can
you were
use to
Levi, sorry.
confuse and disguise the young
Yes,
quarterbacks.
absolutely. Yeah, no, it really allows this defense to do all the things that they do. So keeping them locked up, and then now, kind of going backwards in the conversation, getting Tremaine to play to his potential and
Yeah.
having Matt Milano play, that whole middle is what makes a Sean McDermott defense play to this elite level that we've seen them be able to play at this year. So those guys stay healthy, that core in the middle, and you had Taryn in there as that sort of slot additional linebacker on the field. Solidifying that core in the middle of the field has been such an advantage for the Sean McDermott defense. He built it really exactly the way that he wants it to be built, and he's developed the players for it exactly in the way that he needs it. So this could get real crazy on this defense. So to sort of answer your question, I think everyone's going to continue to progress in the ascending direction along this defense. You've talked me into it.
And I think there's plenty of reason to see that. I don't think that, even if there is management of snaps from an Addison or from a Hughes, it's going to be because of the progression of AJ Epinesa and Boogie Basham, or that Gregory Rousseau is ready for 65% of snaps. Like, it's going to be because of that. So I don't think there's a huge concern across there, and I think there's a lot of excitement there. And Steven asking here, were the Titans in Henry an exception, or is it a problem? There's only one Derrick Henry on the planet. He is as much of an exception as any play. He's as much of an exception as Tyreek Hill is an exception.
He's legitimately in the MVP conversation, and the only guy that isn't a quarterback. Yeah.
So, one, I don't think the Titans, if we played them 10 times, I think the Bills win 8. It just happened, and annoyingly, one of the other 2 was Monday night. If we played them again, I'm not going to be horrified or terrified or concerned. I'm going to feel confident that we can win and that we should win. But yeah, anytime you play a team with exciting, talented people, just like if we played the Chiefs again, just because we beat them doesn't mean that Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce can't go nuts and have a great game and beat the Bills. They're super talented. We beat the Ravens last year in the playoffs and shut them down. They didn't have a single offensive touchdown. That doesn't mean they can't win this year. There is an upper crust of talented teams. The Bills are in that upper crust. I think the Bills might even be the best of that upper tier of teams. They're not so much better that their bad day is going to beat those other teams' good days. They have to have a good day against those other good teams, and the Bills didn't have a good day Monday night, so they lost. That's going to happen. You have to bring your A game, and any team that goes on a playoff run and wins a Super Bowl put together 4 really good games. And that even last year, Taylor Heineke and the Washington football team almost knocked Tom Brady and Tampa Bay out of the playoffs in the wild card round, and then they went on their run the rest of the way. He threw how many interceptions against the Packers in the NFC Championship game? Right. You don't have to be perfect to be able to go on a run and win a Super Bowl.
5 losses and was not.
They were 7-5 at one point. They were a wild card. It's you have to get hot at the right time and put together the right games. But even then, they weren't untouchable in the playoffs. It wasn't like the Joe Flacco run where he was just those Ravens teams were unbelievable all 4 playoff games and played amazing. That Buccaneers team, barely held on in some of those games. You need to be good. So, it's no different than, did the Steelers put together the blueprint to beat the Bills? And people go, well, yeah, if you can bring pressure with the front 4 and cover with the back 7. And yes, that's the recipe to beat every good quarterback in NFL history. Anytime you can get a ton of pressure with the front 4 and drop 7 into coverage, that's the recipe to beat every good quarterback ever. So yeah, of course, that's also the recipe to beat Josh Allen.
Yeah.
Just not that many teams can do it.
Yeah, no, most can't.
Yes, but the vast majority cannot.
Yeah.
So speaking of which, what do we expect the rest of the season? Any final thoughts on what people should think here and what you're looking for as we wrap things up?
Yeah, so I think this is going to just continue to get really fun. I think this is going to be a fun, special year. We had a lot of fun last year, and that was a new fun for us, right? Like, the Bills were one of the best teams in the NFL, got to the AFC Championship game. We enjoyed that ride. This is different because it's not new anymore. Now it's expected for the Bills to be this. But the thing that I'm loving about this is fans in the stadiums. These games are super exciting and fun. The Bills are the kind of belle of the ball in the NFL. When they're playing, everybody's eyes are on them. Everyone I talk to has one of the Bills players on their fantasy teams. I can't tell you how many people text me with Josh Allen. Hope he has a big game tonight.
Multiple tweets and texts during the Titans game.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I'm so jealous you have that guy.
Yeah.
literally multiple people sending stuff like that.
Yes, and they're going to have more primetime games here. I think they're, like you said, they're going to get that flex game. All eyes are going to be on them. This is going to be another fun year with a lot of big wins left on the schedule ahead of us. Enjoy this. I know it got a little shaky early on and we just coming off a loss. There's no reason to feel bad about this team. Feel excited that we have one of the best teams in the NFL. We've got a whole slate of games that we just laid out to continue to watch. And this is going to be a fun couple of months, and it's going to extend well into January and possibly into February. And just enjoy it. This is going to be great. We're going to have a big, nice stretch of wins here, cracking some Uncle Jumbos here in the post-game show. Just live it up. Have fun. Enjoy this stress-free Sunday, though. No Bills football is kind of nice for 1 week.
Yeah, I agree. It's fun. Watch some of the other games with the same critical eye that you watch the Bills and see how flawed some of those other teams are. But I agree. I think that you guys should expect another 9 or 10 wins through the rest of this regular season. I think you should expect a good run at the number 1 seed. I think you should expect home playoff games. I think you should expect playoff wins. I think you can still be excited about going there. No team should expect to win the conference title game or expect to win the Super Bowl.
Especially not after 20 years of not doing any of it.
There is no dominant team in the NFL. No fan base right now should expect those things. I think the Bills are in an elite upper tier of the top 6 or 8 teams, and I think they're higher than that. I think they're in the top 2 or 3 overall that can hope for that and have a reasonable chance at it, and that you should not feel crazy saying, I think the Bills can win the Super Bowl. And there's nothing I've seen so far that tells me I don't think that's the case. If you can go into Kansas City and put it on them 38-20, you can win the Super Bowl. Do the Steelers losses and Titans losses frustrate me and give me an idea of the floor of this team? Absolutely. But both of those games, again, if the Bills block the Titans punt that was this far away and the Steelers punt and the Steelers guy was that far away, instead of blocking the punt, the Bills win that game.
Right.
If, all of a sudden Josh Allen converts and just rides Mitch Morris in there for the first down and then we score, the Bills win that game. They're right there from being 6-0, even though they were very frustrated losses and that we were nitpicking 35-0 wins against the Dolphins and nitpicking 40-0 wins against the Texans. That's how good this team is. They're going to put up an awful lot more of those with this schedule, and you should be really excited about the future here.
Absolutely.
So as we sign off here, make sure you're checking out our sponsors, Uncle Jumbo's, Underdog Fantasy. Download the app, use promo code COVER1, get yourself $10 free, and be excited about everything else that we have going on here. We'll be with you next Wednesday to preview the Dolphins game and get ready for that. Excited to break out here, enjoy watching football and other teams this weekend, and have a nice relaxing week. But on behalf of Aaron Quinn, this is Greg Tompsett. You've been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we